Hi, I'm Scott Simpson.
And I'm Charla Stever.
And we work at TIE, Technology and Innovation and Education, hence the giant logo right behind us. And if you're taking this, if you're watching this, this is an introduction to Circle of Trust approach. Probably what you're doing is you're going to be taking one of our other kind of courses or trainings that involves you engaging with some other people in some conversations. And we're going to share the Circle of Trust approach, at least the version that we use quite a bit. It comes from the Center for Courage and Renewal, which was founded by Parker Palmer. And so everything that we're going to be sharing comes really from that context. What is this Circle of Trust good for, Charla?
So mostly when we use this is anytime we want to have a conversation within a group, where especially if there's a content piece that might be something that a lot of people have differing opinions on. Yeah,
it's hard to have conversations in really healthy ways sometimes because we're all coming from different places, different perspectives, and sometimes we're not sure how to approach touchy subjects or differing perspectives. This courage, this Circle of Trust approach really creates a safe space for us to have even difficult conversations and for us to bring, invite and welcome everybody into that circle and their voices.
And it's really about practicing the skills needed. I mean, yes, we are actually working on things in those circles.
Right.
When we come together, like in a retreat setting.
Right.
But what that does is it gives us practice in a technique that is helpful to us in everyday life.
Kind of carries over.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's really the hope, is that by engaging in these circles, so whatever opportunities you have over the next bit of time to be in conversation with other people, with this holding to this way of being together, we hope that'll give you practice to be able to use it when you're at work or home or school or wherever it is that you are.
So you may just be watching this because you're interested in it, and that's fine. If you're watching this because you're going to be doing one of our other trainings, then just know that we'll kind of be referencing back to this and saying, kind of like we talked about in that intro video. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll take a look at this graphic here, which is just basically kind of a representation of a conversation, a circle. One thing I'd like to say about a circle is it's different than having a podium and a bunch of people down below listening, because it's not hierarchical. In a circle, everyone's kind of on even standing. You can see everybody's faces, and everyone has a shared, even kind of voice. And so the circle, I think, communicates that. When we come together in a circle, instead of all sitting down in rows to listen to the expert lecture us, that's a very different dynamic. There are places where it's great to hear I like to hear an expert talk. If they're really good at it, I'd like to sit and hear an expert talk about what they're expert about for 2 or 3 hours. That's great. But that's not really what this is about. This is about opening up community. So what you'll notice is you've got all these folks, and they're all coming from different places, and they're coming together for a conversation. What you see now behind them, they bring all of the things that are part of their past, their names, their stories, their wins, their losses, their loves, their relationships, their all the stuff that they're really proud of, and all the stuff that they're kind of sometimes ashamed of, and they'd like to hide it. All of that stuff is coming behind them. All of those things that they've done. Okay, and in our culture, what we tend to do is we tend to focus on those things first. The first thing I find out, what do you do? What do you do for a living? Tell me what you do. Or if I'm angry, what did you do? And we give that focus first.
That reminds me, when we have been involved in some of the work we do, especially with our Native communities in our state, in our region, one of the big learnings I've taken away from several elders is the importance of, when you introduce yourself, you talk about who your family is. Who is it that you belong to? That's what comes first.
Identity.
identity.
Who I
It's
am.
everything.
Who I am, not just my accolades. But here's what's interesting about the circle. We know all of that is there, but we're going to resist turning each other into human doings. A human doing, just a real quick and brief definition, is someone who is working hard to identify themselves by their doings. I'm trying to gain identity by doing this and doing that and doing enough so that I can be, whatever it is I deserve to be because of all these things I've done, okay? Which is really backwards. We're human beings with unique gifts and unique talents and unique, challenges. And what we do should grow out of who we are, not the other way around. And so in this circle of trust, what we do is we say, first and foremost, I'm going to see you as a being. I know all those other things are back there behind you. And I'm going to find out about that probably, but I'm not going to find out about it by prying it out of you or by Facebook stalking you or by
finding out from someone else.
Asking, so what's her deal? What's going on with it? Or by making assumptions about you. Well, look how she's dressed. What do you think? I mean, or whatever, Instead of making assumptions about someone, you see them as a human being, and you know that as we gain and grow in trust and relationship, we're going to share stories. That's how I'll find out about all those things.
That's right.
So in the circle, what we have in the middle is a third thing. What might be a third thing, Charlotte?
So when we think about a third thing, it's whatever we're gathering around to connect through. And so sometimes a third thing is a piece of writing, like maybe a poem or a song. It might be a piece of artwork. It might be a project you're working on. Actually, sometimes it's the work that we're doing. It's this thing that we are all engaging with in some way or another. And so we call it the third thing because there's each of us as individuals, there's our group, and then there's this thing that we do together.
And what's interesting is you might think that here we are gathered all around this third thing, so that third thing is the most important thing. And the third thing is important, but the third thing is not the only thing, and it's not the most important thing either. It becomes a vehicle, a really important, a really wonderful, a really special vehicle for my personal learning, but also for our community's growth and binding and learning about each other. If you take a look, and this is what makes it officially a circle of trust, and we're going to talk about the touchstones in just a few minutes. The touchstones are kind of the norms, the agreed upon things that we're saying. When we come together to do this, these are kind of the ways that we're going to engage with each other. This is our way of being. But what's important, first of all, is that, I'm going to learn a lot about this third thing. Let's say it's a poem we read, okay? Well, the first thing that we do in a circle of trust is we spend some time, number one, on my own personal reflection. I'm going to listen. I'm going to connect. I'm going to take some time, some thinking time, some meditation time, some journaling time. Early on, that might only be a minute or 2 minutes. We've done retreats, a series of retreats with people who got really experienced, and we might give them a whole hour to process on their own, because that's where they're at. They're ready to do that. They're ready to just dig in, to reflect, to spend a whole hour hiking, then journaling, then thinking about this thing that we've all gathered around. And all of that happens, all that individual work happens before, really, we enter into the sharing and deep listening, which is the next part.
So when we move into the space of deep sharing and deep listening, what's happening is we've all experienced that third thing in some way. Maybe a poem was read, maybe a writing was shared, maybe we've described what our project is that we need to accomplish. So we have this third thing that we're all looking at and learning about and from. And then what we're going to do at that point is we're going to begin to engage with it. So maybe it's, I've done a little reflecting on this project, or I've done a little reflecting on this writing, and what it said to me was, and we share that. I thought about this thing that I'd never thought about before, and this is what I'm thinking right now. And then another person starts to share that, who listened to you say that, who then says, I agree, or no, you know what, I kind of went a different way with that. In my mind, it went more like this. And then you start to have this conversation where there is both sharing and listening happening in a good, deep way. And we are learning from this thing, the third thing, but we're also learning from ourselves and each other.
Because when I connect with it, I connect with it in a real specific way that is specific to me. But then when I hear somebody else across the circle connect with it in a way that I would never have thought, suddenly I learn more about the thing itself, but I also learn something about Charla.
That's also why that reflection is so important. And anytime we do work with anyone, we really try to work that reflection time in, because it's very easy otherwise to have the first person share and then go, yep, what he said.
Or well, what I thought wasn't nearly as good as what he said.
Right.
I'm not going to share mine because I just, I didn't get anything out of it. I don't know. And here's the important thing. I just want to interject this here. All of this is encompassed by one of the touchstones that we're going to get into in just a minute, but this is by invitation, okay? And that's really, really important. This is not a share or die event, and that's one of the touchstones. And what's important about that is this. If I really do feel like, what I thought about that was really stupid, I don't think I want to share. You know what? I probably don't need to share. If that's where I'm at, I don't need to be forced to share, okay? Now, what needs to happen probably is I need to listen. I need to see how other people are sharing. And at some point, in the next circle we do, or in the next retreat that we do, or a little bit later in the day, I'll gain some confidence and I'll feel good about sharing something that I do feel comfortable with, And it's a growing process. It's also a process of growing in trust and in feeling safe in the space. So once that deep sharing and deep listening has happened, and sometimes that happens with the whole group. Sometimes it happens with just we'll process this, and sometimes we'll have people share just in twos, pair and share. Sometimes we'll have them share in triads, threes, quads. Quintuplets? No, it's not quintuplets. That's like babies.
Quints, groups of 5. It's really up to as facilitators. You kind of mix that up so that people might come back and share with the whole group, which sometimes is as many as 20, but people might feel real comfortable sharing with just 2 or 3. Sure. So that's really important. The next process, though, is one that we're going to go a little deeper into here in just a little bit, and that's responding with honest, open questions. And we're going to actually go fairly deep into that here in just a little bit. But this is another thing that connects with a couple of different touchstones that we'll look at. But, my initial reaction might be a number of things. It might be to disagree with you. I think you're wrong because, and suddenly I'm in Mr. Debate mode, okay? Or I might say, you know what? You're seeing that all wrong. Let me fix you. I've experienced that before. Let me tell you what I did, because it would be really good advice for you to do that too. And I'm just dying to hear it.
Yeah. So what we do instead of that is we learn how to respond with honest, open questions. And what those honest, open questions do, they enable it. If Charla has shared something, it enables me to not make it about me. It enables me to offer her a question that allows her to look more deeply into what she's already shared. Or maybe look at it in a slightly different way, but it's not me giving her advice or giving her advice in the form of a question or anything like that. It's not me just being curious. Oh, wow, I want to hear the dirty details. It's not like that. It's really, how can I ask a question that will help her look again into what she's already talked about? So what we'd like to do now is move on into looking, first of all, at the touchstones themselves. So the touchstones, once again, come from the Center for Courage and Renewal, and which was begun by Parker Palmer, who has a number of books. We'd certainly recommend those. A Hidden Wholeness is one that really delves deeply into a lot of these ideas. The Courage to Teach is a great book, and then there are many, many others. But these touchstones are really guides for communities and for circles to help us to engage with each other in a way that's really healthy and helpful.
So as you are engaging in your group that's coming up, we want to encourage you to hold each of these touchstones as a way of being together anytime you are gathered to do this particular work.
It'd be good to keep them visible. It would be good to review them, One of the things that we like to do when we start a new retreat with people who have been through this before, even asking a question, which of the touchstones is the most challenging for you? Mm-hmm. Which of the touchstones has really turned out to be something was really, really super helpful, and just engage in a little bit of talk around the touchstones themselves. So we're going to take a look at each one of these, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time, but we'll give you just a little bit, read these, and just mention a couple of things about them that we found helpful.
So the first one, give and receive welcome. We're not going to read through every little bit of this, but one of the things we just highlight here is the importance of hospitality. Yeah. That we are creating hospitable spaces, that people feel welcome, that we know we're here to learn together, and that they can expect that when they are in the circle.
Be present as fully as possible. A lot of times we say that in norms for a meeting, and it just means turn off your cell phone. Well, it means that, but it also means to really be present, to bring your whole self as much as possible. And that's not just all the joys and successes and the positive, the light side, but also your doubts and your fears and your failings. We want to get to a place where all of that, I can bring all of that to bear on what we're engaging in, because I learn both from my successes as well as from my failures.
What is offered in the circle is by invitation and not demand. And Scott's already touched on this briefly, but that whole idea of creating invitation rather than something that I feel like I have to do. If I don't do this, I'm not going to be accepted into the group or whatever, but rather that you are invited, that we want you, if you're feeling good about it, to share. And we will expect that we will gain something from you by your sharing.
Speak your truth in ways that respect other people's truth. There's really two elements to this. One, I need to respect other people's truths. I need to understand that not everyone sees it the way I see it, and I need to be respectful of that in my words and in my actions. But the other part of it is I also need to speak my truth. Sometimes, if I'm worried that people are going to disagree with me or see it differently than I do, I just get quiet. And that's really something that that's certainly something that, since this is by invitation, that's certainly something that is your option. Mm-hmm. But push against that. Really try to get into the place where I can be honest and I can share, but I've done the work to know how is it that I share my perspective in a way that still honors the people in this circle that I know may see it differently.
The next one can be challenging, depending on what your personality is like and what your position is like. No fixing, saving, advising, or correcting each other. Even though as somebody is sharing, they may share a story that is so similar to your own background. And almost always, I know I feel it every time, there's this little sense of, oh, I've had that happen before, and here's what I did, and it's how I fixed it. And you want to give that. And there are times for that.
Sure.
When my children come to me and say, I need help with this, I may advise them in some way.
I was going to say, if you're in deep relationship with someone and they come to you for advice, don't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't give advice."
But let me offer you a question.
Yeah. I mean, if they want advice and you're in relationship with them, give them advice.
Right.
That's okay. They know where it's at, and they can take it or leave it. But this is to not be the guy who goes around giving everybody advice,
Right.
you know?
So as you think about that, hold yourself back from offering, oh, this is my story, because then suddenly what this person has shared has become about you
Right.
rather than about them.
So the solution to that is, or one solution to that is, learn to respond to others with honest, open questions. And we're going to go deeply into honest, open questions here in a moment. But what this really is about is it's an alternative to advice and to correcting. It's a way of giving someone something that might be helpful for them to look and listen to their inner teacher, which we're going to talk about in another touchstone here in a moment.
When the going gets rough, turn to wonder. And this is a favorite one of mine. I wonder why a person feels the way they do when they share something. I wonder why I notice this really strong reaction in myself when someone says something. When we take a moment to turn to wonder is like taking a breath. It's like avoiding going into defensive mode and allowing myself to just think for a moment and wonder a little bit about the situation rather than reacting immediately. And I actually find that when I take that breath, I am much less likely to stick my foot in my mouth over something.
Yeah. Attend to your own inner teacher. Sometimes we look to everybody else's advice. We look to everybody else. We look to everywhere else to say, okay, how are we doing this? What's the best thing to do? And if you're that kind of person, this may be very hard to stop and to say, hey, I have some wisdom right here. I need to listen to that. I need to listen to what my heart, my inner teacher is telling me about this thing. And that's first and foremost. Yeah, I need to listen to other people too. This is all about listening. But first and foremost, I have to be guided by that inner compass, that inner teacher that I have. And I have to come to know that I do have that. If you don't know that you've got wisdom within you, that you have a lot of amazing answers within you, that might be part of the problem. You need to come to know that you really do have a lot of wisdom within you.
Trust and learn from the silence. So often, especially in group settings, silence is just rare. How often do we actually sit with another person and let there just be a little bit of silence? And that's how we really learn ourselves. That's how we discover. When we have an opportunity where someone says something, and before another person jumps in on top of it, you can sit with it for a minute. Suddenly connections happen where you're like, oh, never thought of it that way before. And that learning takes place inside of you, and it has an opportunity to connect into what your experiences are, what your life has been. And so silence is actually, it should be treated like a member of the group.
I'll also say that for some participants in some of our retreats, this was the scariest one because we're so out of practice, because we don't have silence much at all. We've got noise going all the time. And so it's a shock. It's a shock to the system to have silence. It's a beautiful shock eventually, but it can be scary at first. Observe deep confidentiality. Part of the beauty of a circle is that you know where that circle is. I know that what I share in this group of 20 people, or in this group of 10 people, or in this group of 3 people, I know that I'm sharing it with these people. I'm not sharing it with them and all of their gossip partners. And so that gives us a sense of safety that we just can't get if we don't know that.
And it's also a responsibility of people in the group
Absolutely.
to hold true to that.
Absolutely.
And then the last one, know that it's possible to leave the circle with whatever it was that you needed when you arrived, and that the seeds planted here can keep growing in the days ahead. So knowing that maybe not everything is going to become apparent to me right now, but that I'm going to continue to sit with it. I'm going to continue to think about it, and I will continue to learn. We sometimes we're really results oriented, and I want the results now. And if I have the confidence that something good happened, that something good was planted, and that I may not see it this moment, but if I sit with it, if I let it work, I'll find out that I got something really important, more than I needed, maybe even. So let's talk just a little bit before we wrap up about honest, open questions, because I think that requires just a little bit of unpacking, because it is a very specific sort of thing. It's not. Some folks sometimes slip and say open-ended questions, and there's something connected there, but that's not the same thing. These aren't just open-ended questions. These are designed, and you design them on the fly, because there's not a list of them. There's not an official list of honest, open questions. But their purpose is in support of the touchstone: no fixing, no saving, no advising, no setting each other straight, and in support of our intention to help each other listen for inner truth, for that inner teacher. So these are questions that assist another person to listen more deeply to themselves, not just to listen to me. So we're going to take a look at this list of guidelines and maybe talk a little bit about some of them, and then we'll make sure that you have the link connected with this training to these documents, so that you can review these anytime, both the touchstones and the helps for honest, open questions. So when we think about an honest, open question, one of the things I use to help myself determine whether that's what I'm going to ask is whether or not I kind of know what the answer should be. If I'm trying to guide that person into something, into thinking about something a certain way, that's leading. Open and honest questions are questions that I can't possibly know the answer to. I'm just going to lay it there for you to think about and see where it goes with you. And if you're not wanting to think about it, you can disregard it. But it's meant to be something that helps you and guides you to a deeper level of thinking or reflection on whatever it is that you are working on, or a question that you have that you're wondering about, or life decision that you're trying to make, whatever it happens to be. Maybe it's something at work. So this list has a lot of things in it that will help you think through whether or not what you're about to ask is just open, honest, meant to be a gift to the person to think a little more, or if there's something in it, that is leading or guiding them in a way that they're not inviting, they're not asking for. So
advice disguised as a question.
Right.
So have you thought about seeing a therapist?
I take this really great prescription that helps me a lot with that. Have you tried that?
Have you tried? Yeah, have you tried this? Or getting ahead of the person's own words. If they said, I've been feeling sad. And well, aren't you also kind of angry about that? Reading things into, that's not an open, honest question.
Right. Also, when you start to tell your own story in the midst of it, you're probably off on a tangent, or you're possibly even turning it to be about you.
That's right. Sometimes, though, even a kind of slightly off-the-wall question, if it's really truthfully, not a leading question, but it's just a completely out-of-the-box, different way of looking at it, what color is this problem that you're talking about? What color is it? That might be something that just might, knock things off balance for them just enough that they look at it in a different way and say, it's really red for me. And what that tells me about it is,
I remember a question I was asked one time was, what would the name of the song be of what you're dealing with right now? And trying to come up with that, because music is a huge part of my life. That was very helpful to me, and it helped me think about it in a new way. You know what, this song is exactly where I'm at. If I were in my car right now, I'd be just blasting this and singing along with it.
Pacing is kind of important. So that, if someone, it kind of goes back to making sure that silence is there as well. The goal is not to pump somebody with a million honest, open questions. One or two, maybe give them exact, and they may chew on one question for the next 5 years. I've actually had people say, someone offered me this honest, open question 5 years ago, and I'm still working on it because it really made an impact.
I actually wrote a book about one of my honest, open questions I was asked.
Yes, you did.
Someone said, it was about my students, but if your students were a garden, what would they be? And I ended up working on that for a couple years as I wrote a book. And so those questions can be gifts that really do last a long time. And so we share this as a way for you to consider as you are engaging around the next bit of learning, these segments that we're going to do, whatever the courses that you're taking, that you would take time to engage with each other in this way and offer a question when appropriate that is that open, honest question that helps the learner really think more deeply. It's a real
skill that you can grow into, and that you can practice and get better at it, and it's really refreshing, and it's actually pretty empowering to not feel like I have to come up with the best advice. I have to come up with a fix to this solution. I have to take the burden of all. No, I can offer a question that helps, that allows this person, this other human being, to remain the master of working through this, but to know that they've got my support. I'm here with them, present, in empathy, offering helpful questions, and allowing them to be empowered,
I remember when I started using these more and more with my own children, I can remember as they were growing into adults, they would say, and they're trying to make some decision, they'd say, do that thing where you ask me questions, and that's where I realized the real value of that. Sometimes I don't want to be told what to do. I want to make my own choice. I want to make a decision, but I need to think about it, and helped me think about it in a different way.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. I hope this has been helpful. I hope whatever training you're taking next, that this is helpful, that you can practice some of these things with your small group that you're working with. And if you're not taking another training with us, that's fine. I hope this has been helpful in whatever setting you find yourself in, because I think it does. This has come up. We've used this in so many different settings, and it really creates that safe space for, I think, important engagement to happen and community building.
Yes. So thank you for coming along on this little journey with us, and we wish you well as you move into wherever you're headed next.
Be well.